Good morning. Welcome to Humor Worship at Westminster and our exclusive family of faith. We particularly welcome our visitors and those joining us on YouTube.
Knock, knock. Interrupting cow. Moo! I know, that's one of my favorite jokes. And do you know, it makes me laugh every time, even though I know what's coming. Asher, you told me a really good joke this morning. Do you remember what it was? What do you call a three-humped camel? And what do you call it? Pregnant. And Patrick, do you have one? What's your one? Are you saying, what did the girl octopus say to the boy octopus? What did she say? Can I hold your hand, 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 hand? How many times do we say it? 8. And Jojo, what do you have? A punny joke. Okay, we like punny jokes. There isn't mushroom in here. What's your punny joke?
I wanted to tell you about the story about the broken pencil, but there really is no point.
Oh, we got some good comedians. Well, do you guys know why we're telling jokes today? Kind of. We call it Holy Humor Sunday. Can you guys say Holy Humor Sunday?
Holy Humor Sunday!
Unless you think this is just something that I like because I like jokes, do you know this goes way back to the medieval church, and they also called it Bright Sunday because it's our second Sunday in Easter, and we're celebrating the greatest joke that God played, because for 3 days, sin and evil thought they had won. And then the tomb was empty, and He is risen.
He is risen indeed.
And so knowing that Jesus is risen, we are free to laugh together and to revel in the joy that Jesus gives us. Jesus promises us in John 16 that we will have joy and that no one can take that joy from you. So when something makes you laugh or smile, remember that that's a gift from God, and that we can have that gift and that freedom to laugh because of Jesus and the empty tomb. Our third reading this morning comes from Genesis 18, verses 9 through 19. Leading up to this story, Abraham had welcomed 3 strangers to his home, knowing that God is present, and asking his wife Sarah to help make them a meal. So our reading this morning picks up after they have finished eating their meal. The men said to Abraham, "Where is your wife Sarah?" And he said, "There, in the tent." Then one said, "I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent entrance behind him. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I have grown old and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?' Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? At the set time I will return to you in due season, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. He said, "Oh yes, you did laugh." Then the men set out from there, and they looked toward Sodom. And Abraham went with them to set them on their way. The Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do, seeing that Abraham shall become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him? No, For I have chosen him, that he may charge his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring about for Abraham what he has promised him." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Are you excited for opening day tomorrow? My brother isn't in town and planning on attending 2 games this week. And with the return of baseball, I thought you'd like to hear about the first baseball game in the Bible. In the big inning, Eve stole first, Adam stole second, Cain struck out Abel, and the prodigal son came home. The giants and the angels were rained out. You're welcome. You're welcome. When was the last time you really laughed and not just groaned at my jokes? Maybe you heard a really great April Fool's joke on Friday. Maybe it's been a long time since you had a reason to laugh. I find that laughter often comes to us in many unusual situations. We often associate laughter with happiness, but haven't we also seen it in the midst of grief? Laughter in the midst of despair? Laughter out of awkwardness? Laughter out of fear or insecurity? Laughter appears in all shapes and sizes in our world, from brand new laughs from our grandbabies to LOLs laughing out loud and emojis in our virtual communication, to laughing as new friends become old friends, to laughing as we sit around fondly remembering someone who's no longer with us. Laughter takes center stage in our Genesis story this morning. We hear of Abraham entertaining angels unaware, providing radical hospitality to 3 strange men. He brings them something to drink, and Sarah makes them something to eat. Sarah was probably already laughing on the inside, wondering what the fuss was about with these strangers. Sarah and Abraham had been on some adventures throughout their marriage, so much that their names were changed from Abram and Sarai to Abraham and Sarah. They had met some powerful people. He had passed her off as his sister twice. They had traveled to Egypt. They had stayed by each other's side through thick and thin, good times and scary times. All the adventures of life except parenthood, or should I say except motherhood, since Abraham was a baby daddy through his slave Hagar. But no babies for Sarah. She grew older and older. Her body changed. She went through the hot flashes. Her menstruation stopped, and that was it for her. She knew it. Probably at this point she had accepted the hole in her life, the thing that could never be. Sure, God had promised Abraham that she would have a child even in her old age. And then even Abraham laughed at God. But Sarah had probably rationalized God's promise, telling herself she'd be a metaphorical mother of so many other people. Sarah laughs. And do you really blame her? She has just heard something so ridiculous for the second time that she, an old woman past menopause, could actually bear a child. I wonder if her laughter was part dismissal. After all, this was a group of men sitting around talking. What could they possibly know about a woman's body, about what it is and isn't capable of? Maybe it was the heat, the sun making them think such foolish thoughts. Sarah laughs a laugh of impossibility, a laugh of hopelessness, a laugh of a woman who has borne the shame of barrenness too long. Sarah laughs because these strangers had touched on her deepest shame and her deepest desire to be a mother. It was a laugh of disbelief, a laugh of secret hope, and in this story, Hope does not disappoint. Have you ever heard something so ridiculous that you just laugh? Maybe it's your kid telling you a very creative and made-up story about how the washcloth ended up in the toilet. Or your boyfriend coming up with a cover story about patching jeans in order to ask your parents for blessing on your marriage. Or maybe that last summer we were going to bring a petting zoo to church for VBS. Or maybe that Westminster would find new life through a flood and not close our doors. Or that Baptists and Presbyterians and Catholics and Methodists were going to set aside theological differences and join together to hand out backpacks and school supplies for kids in need through Operation Excel, and not just once, but twice. I resonate with Sarah's tendency to laugh at the unexpected and the seemingly ridiculous. When I was 17, on Youth Sunday at Grace Presbyterian, I preached my senior sermon along with 3 other seniors. It was a good worship, and on the way out, people were saying nice things to the youth, as you guys will do in a couple weeks on our Youth Sunday. One of my former Sunday school teachers, Mrs. Denny, came out of the receiving line, shaking our hands, and she said to me, "Have you considered ministry? I really think you should." And on the inside, I burst with laughter. Me? A minister? Who would put me in charge of anything? Who would actually want to hear my reflections on faith? Who would let me teach? Who would let me pray with them or invite me into their special family times? Who would trust me to marry or bury or baptize precious young and old people? Moreover, everyone knows that church is boring, and there is no way I could ever do that. On the outside, I smiled politely and said thank you to Mrs. Denny. I had it all planned out anyway at 17. I was going to go to the University of Texas in Austin and study child psychology and open a child psychologist clinic and get married under the big tree at First Presbyterian in Fort Worth. I had my plan, and it in no way involved ever being a pastor. God was calling me through Mrs. Denny, and my only response was laughter. God was calling Sarah through her eavesdropped conversation, and her response was laughter. The truth here is that sometimes our only possible response to God and God's actions in our lives is laughter. Sarah's laughter was followed by fear as she realizes these strangers weren't joking. Fear that maybe ranged from, "Uh-oh, I laughed at God," to, "Could I really be a mother now? Who would entrust me with a child? I can't chase after a toddler. I might break a hip." What has God called you to where the only response is laughter? Was it something in the midst of joy or in the midst of suffering? What is God calling you to now that you're laughing about? Are you with Sarah saying, "Not at my age, I can't possibly do that"? Or, "I don't know enough, I can't possibly teach or go to Sunday school"? Or, "Talk to someone new, but I might say the wrong thing"? What is God calling Westminster to that we may laugh about at first? Is it being a New Day satellite location where each week 100 hungry kids will depend on us for food for the weekend? Is it encouraging teenagers to go without food for 30 hours? Or starting a capital campaign before you even called an installed pastor? Is there something that still lies ahead that we may laugh and think impossible? What laughable new life does God have in store for us? The good news is that God can take our laughter. God can take our laughter, our anger, our tears, our yelling, our silence. God can take it. And I know that God understands our chuckles and our secret laughter. The Genesis story this morning ends with Sarah wide-eyed, stifling her laughter in front of the strangers, as they encourage Sarah to claim her laughter, to let it out. And they make Abraham a promise about the multitude of nations. And several chapters later, Sarah, at 90 years old, gives birth to a bouncing baby boy, and she names him Isaac, as instructed by God, which means he laughs in Hebrew. Sarah said that God had given her laughter, and that everyone who hears of this story will laugh with her. This is our still laughing God, a God who brings promises of new life in places where death and barrenness seem to rule. This is our Easter God, who fills an old womb and empties a new tomb. This is our parent God, who claims us as children of promise through the waters of baptism. We who are born again in the covenant through Jesus Christ are renamed Isaac, laughter, for you know that we bring God plenty of it. We are children of the promise that what seems laughable becomes possible with God, that laughter and surprise are part of our faith journeys, that God can take ordinary things and ordinary people and make them extraordinary. As we laugh and play at the font each week, I hope you hear your name called. That as a child of God, God has a path for you, a path that may involve stifled laughter or great guffaws, a path that is not over yet, a path that begins at the empty tomb, the greatest joke ever played on death and sin. So revel in laughter as part of your life and your faith, child of God, child of promise. For you never know where, when, or what God might call you to next. May you, like Sarah, laugh a lot, fear a little, and trust even more. May you, like Sarah, experience a resurrection of new life in places where you thought your life was barren. May you, like Sarah, listen for God's call in your life, even when you've reached and surpassed 90 years old. And may you laugh loudly, freely, and confidently, for the Lord is risen. The Lord is risen indeed. Amen.